African face, but that you can still see the wonderful bone structure here. And she grew up on a dairy farm. I don't know if any of you recognize this group, Freddie Lyman and the Teenagers. They're very popular in the 50s. And what strikes me about this photograph is their wonderful dental development. They did not have their teeth straightened. They could not have afforded that. Almost certainly they grew up in an environment where they had access to raw milk and lots of organ meats. And the African Americans tended to eat the less expensive, least expensive cuts of meat. What I want to say here is you can't go into a high school today in the United States and find 5 young people with naturally straight teeth like this if they're born in the United States. This kind of dental structure, which was normal even in the 50s, has disappeared. The Temptations, a generation later, may have had their teeth straightened and whitened, but can you see this change in facial structure? It's this underdevelopment of the middle third of the face. And we know that if you continue this kind of diet for another generation or two, you have no more reproduction. I love this photograph from 1910. Now, these are athletes. One of them has a narrow face, so that he's the exception. Everyone else has beautiful facial development. Look at the high cheekbones. This is a European American. This is a Native American. The Native Americans were eating buffalo guts and foods that we don't like, you know. But the European Americans have equally good bone structure, and they were eating raw milk, meats, organ meats, a lot of organ meats in those days. Now today, if you take a photograph like this, even a photograph of athletes, it's the reverse. You may have 2 or 3 with excellent bone structure, usually not born in the United States, born in the Caribbean or someplace like that. And all the rest have compromised or narrowed facial structure. Here's a famous person. Elvis was very handsome, but he had a narrow face compared to his parents. Look at their facial structure. So the diet that we had in this country up to the Second World War, in general, supported good physical development. Here we have some Latin American children. They probably from a very poor village. We would say that these children were deprived. And yet they have the greatest gift that any human being can have, and that is normal physical development. They probably grew up on kind of a plant-based diet, rice and beans, but certainly they had access to raw milk, especially goat milk. If they did eat animal foods, it was usually the organ meats. And they probably had access to seafood as well. The modern westernized child tends to have a very narrow face. Most of them need braces to straighten their teeth. They are plagued with allergies and asthma. How many of you work in schools today? What are you seeing? Yeah, lots of overdevelopment, overweight, right? Lots of asthma, learning disabilities, behavior problems. We have an epidemic on our hands, and it's the children who are paying the price. The narrow face has become so commonplace that we think of this as normal. These are fashion models. Now, if this is where you ended up, and it's where I ended up, I needed braces, I was very unhealthy growing up. It doesn't mean it's hopeless. You can't change your facial structure, but you can definitely regain your health using the same dietary principles. So I don't want you to feel that there's nothing that can be done. The good news is that the trend towards the narrowing of the face and the physical degeneration can be reversed. And this beautiful woman was born to a mother who had a narrow face, who had a lot of health problems. And when she was a teenager, her family moved to a place where she was near a dairy. And she had access to raw Guernsey milk. And she also they had a little bit more money. And she said she often went out with her friends for lunch, and she couldn't afford the most expensive things on the menu. So she ended up ordering liver about 3 times a week. So she ate a lot of liver as a teenager. And then gave birth to this beautiful girl with naturally straight teeth, who very healthy, very intelligent, very healthy. And my story is similar. When I was a young woman, I went to France to learn to speak French. I went to school in France. And when I was in France, I discovered a food I had never eaten before. And that food is called pâté. And when I had my first bite of pâté, it was like my body giving a sigh of relief. I said, what is this food? It is so delicious. And I made a pig of myself in Europe. I ate pâté morning, noon, and night. I had it for breakfast. And I can't eat that much pâté now. But at that time, I was very depleted. And I really gorged myself on this nutrient-dense food. I had never eaten liver in my life till I went to Europe. And after that, I made a point of always having some as often as I could because I loved it so much. And that was a very fortuitous thing because my first daughter, who was born long before I was introduced to all this, my first child, had naturally straight teeth and none of the health problems that I suffered from as a child. So it's very reversible. And here are some of our beautiful Weston Price babies, mothers who have followed our dietary guidelines and very nutrient-dense diet while they're pregnant. And these babies have broad faces. They are absolutely delightful children. They don't cry very much. They are cheerful. They meet their milestones. There's no greater gift than any family can have. And these are the kind of children that are the hope of the future. And fortunately, a lot of people are listening to what we have to say. I'm pleased to see many young women in this audience because, you know, our future is actually in your hands, in the hands of the young women. Without you listening and taking the effort to eat properly and feed your children properly, we're sunk. We're hopeless. We have no future without you. And the role of the rest of us, the grandmothers, the spouses, partners, aunts and uncles, sisters and brothers, is to support these young women to make it easy and for them to eat properly. So as Dr. Price said, natural beauty, individual beauty is a matter of both design of the face and regularity and perfection of the teeth. Nature always builds harmoniously if conditions are sufficiently favorable, regardless of race, color, or location. He was an amazing man because in his day, one of the reasons given for the narrowing of the face was race mixing. A very racist explanation. And Dr. Price was very careful to point out that he had seen physical degeneration in people whose parents were of the same race and beautiful physical structure in children whose parents were of different races but who followed the native diets. So let's just, we've gone 1 hour. This is not a bathroom break, but it's a stretch break. Let's just stand up and have a little stretch. Thank you. No. Maybe it's a good idea, yeah. But I haven't been bothered by it, but thank you for this.
Oh, and Linda said it's on her.
Oh, okay.
So I have your phone.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I must have eaten a lot of apples when I was young because I was straight to eat.
Yeah.
I was always pretty healthy. But when I started following Western Price again, I started following about 2 years ago, I got gout.
Really?
I didn't know what it was at the time. My fingers would be all lined up every morning.
Were you taking the cod liver oil?
I was taking everything. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
doing a lot of it, and I think I had tortured acid.
Could be.
And I'm just
Yeah.
wondering,
Maybe not enough plant foods, yeah.
don't
Yeah.
you hear a lot of that?
I've never heard that before from one of our
Because
people.
if you look at what gout is, it's from eating rich foods, organ foods.
Well, actually, no. There's an article on our website on gout, and the studies show that it's from too much carbohydrates. So I'm very surprised.
Because the article online says organ foods and a lot of the wealthy usually get gout.
Yeah, because they had sugar.
Yeah, and drinks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, read the article on gout on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've never heard that before. So it's interesting. Yes. When did milk? Around about the Second World War. Yeah. Where did you live? Where did you live? Well, it may have been raw. It may have been raw. Yeah. Yeah, let's wait. I'm going to have people sit down. All right, if you could take your seats. Oh, isn't she gorgeous? Yeah. All right. Shh, 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 shh. One thing we notice, and we always warn the hotels where we have our conferences, our groups are very talkative. All right, so by now you're probably completely confused. All right, I said I was going to answer the question, what is a healthy diet? And as we've seen, there were many different diets. A lot of people read Dr. Price's book and kind of throw up their hands and say, well, there's no such thing as a healthy diet. Some of these diets had almost no plant foods. Some had very few animal foods. Some had a lot of cooked foods. Some had mostly a lot of raw food. Some had dairy foods and some didn't. Some had grains and some didn't. How are we going to make sense of this? Well, Dr. Price did address this at the very end of his book, chapter 22, and with some underlying characteristics. He came up with 3, and then we have added to these. So what we're going to do now is look at the underlying characteristics of healthy diets. What are the principles? And then once you understand the principles, you can eat a diet that conforms to your lifestyle, to how much time you have, to how much you can afford, to what's available to you, and most importantly, to what your children will actually eat. Because it's very important to like these foods and for them to taste good to you. So what we're going to do now is look at 11 characteristics of healthy traditional diets. That will take us to the middle of the afternoon. And then we will get practical. We'll roll up our sleeves and talk about 11 ways you can change your diet for the better. So that's the outline of what we're going to do. So number 1, there were no refined or denatured foods in these healthy traditional diets. And the components of the diet that were refined in Dr. Price's day make a fairly short list. White sugar, white flour, vegetable oils just coming into the diet, canned foods, and condensed milk. The list is quite a bit longer today. Not only do we have refined sugar, we have high fructose corn syrup, which, as we will see later on this afternoon, is actually worse than white sugar, and the artificial sweeteners. White flour, that is the basis of the Western diet. White flour. You walk through an airport and look at all the bread and buns and things that are being sold. Pasteurized milk and skim and low-fat milk are not whole foods. They are foods in which valuable components have been removed or destroyed. Hydrogenated fats and refined vegetable oils are not, have not been in the human diet until very recently, and we will learn about these and why they are so dangerous. And finally, I'm concerned about the protein powders. This is a refined food, and it carries a very special danger that we will learn about. And finally, all the additives in the food, and these additives are additive in their effects. If, as a culture, we decided that we needed maybe 2 or 3 additives to use for preserving foods or whatever, and our diet was otherwise healthy, it'd probably be okay. But in animal studies, they find that if they give several additives at the, what's considered the safe dose, they are additive in their effects, and you end up with dead animals. So that's what we're seeing in our food. So one of Dr. Price's most famous sayings was, "Life in its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed." And once again, Dr. Price was so different from the scientists of his day. And even of our day. The scientists of today believes that what's here in nature got here by chance and was, very long evolution, and there might be mistakes out there, and they're going to fix them. The scientists are going to fix those mistakes. Like this mistake that milk has fat in it. They're going to fix that.